Hey everyone, welcome to Daily English, your place to improve your English every single day. I am Michael.
And I'm Lauren. Today, we're talking about something that almost every English learner struggles with: speaking without pausing.
Let me ask you something. Do you understand English, but when you try to speak, you stop, you hesitate, and you don't know what to say next?
Yeah, that moment when your brain just goes blank, and you start thinking, wait, what's the word? What's the grammar?
Exactly. And suddenly, the conversation feels uncomfortable. First, let's be honest. The problem is not your English level. The real problem is your thinking process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where most people get stuck, because they believe they need to sound smart, or advanced, or even perfect when they speak. But the truth is, real conversations are not like that. People don't speak in perfect sentences all the time. They speak in simple, clear ideas that keep moving forward.
That's a really important point. If you listen carefully to native speakers, you'll notice something interesting. They don't always use complicated grammar, and they don't stop to fix every small mistake. They just keep going, because the goal is to communicate, not to impress.
Exactly. And I think learners put too much pressure on themselves. They start a sentence, and halfway through, they think, wait, is this correct? And that small doubt is enough to break their flow.
Yeah, and once the flow is broken, it's very hard to recover in that moment. You start thinking more, you slow down, and then the pauses become longer and more noticeable.
So maybe the real question is not, how can I speak perfectly, but how can I keep speaking even if it's not perfect?
I like that. That's a much better question because fluency is really about continuity. It's about staying in motion even when you're not 100% sure about every word.
Let's make this practical. Imagine you are talking to someone, and you want to explain your day. Instead of building one long, perfect sentence, you can just break it into smaller parts.
Right. You could say something like, "Today was busy. I had a lot of work. I talked to many people and I feel a little tired now." It's simple, but it flows naturally.
And more importantly, it feels comfortable. You're not fighting with your brain to find the perfect structure. You're just expressing your thoughts, step by step.
Let me ask you something, Lauren. Do you think people pause more because they don't know enough words or because they hesitate too much?
Honestly, I think it's more about hesitation. Of course, vocabulary matters, but even people who know a lot of words still pause if they overthink. It's not always about knowledge, it's about how fast you allow yourself to speak.
That makes sense. So, in a way, confidence plays a big role here, not just language level.
Absolutely. Confidence allows you to continue, even when you're not sure. And that's what creates a natural rhythm in your speech.
Let's talk about that moment when you forget a word, because that's when many learners panic.
Yes, and panic is the worst thing you can do in that situation. When you panic, your brain slows down even more.
Exactly. Instead of stopping, you should train yourself to stay calm and keep explaining. You don't need the exact word to communicate your idea.
For example, if you forget a word, just describe it, or give a simple explanation. The important thing is to keep the conversation alive.
And the more you do that, the more confident you become because you realize something important. You don't actually need perfect English to express yourself.
Yes, and that realization changes everything. You stop being afraid of speaking, and you start enjoying the conversation.
I think another important thing is accepting small pauses, but not letting them turn into long silence.
That's a great point. A short pause is natural, it gives you a moment to think. But when you freeze completely, that's when the problem starts.
So instead of freezing, you can keep a small rhythm even if it's not perfect. That rhythm keeps your brain active and engaged.
And over time, that rhythm becomes your fluency. It's not something that happens overnight, but it builds step by step, conversation by conversation.
Exactly. And once you reach that point, you don't think about every word anymore. You just speak naturally and comfortably.
And you know what's interesting, Michael? Once people stop chasing perfection, they actually start enjoying the conversation more. It becomes less about, am I correct? And more about, am I communicating?
That shift is everything. Because when you focus on communication, your brain relaxes. And when your brain relaxes, your words come out faster, more naturally, and with better flow.
Let's slow this down for a second and make it very clear. When you speak, you have two choices. You either focus on being perfect, or you focus on being understood. And most of the time, you can't do both at the same speed.
Exactly. If you try to be perfect, you slow down. If you focus on being understood, you keep moving. And movement, that's what creates fluency.
So maybe a better habit is this. Instead of stopping when you're unsure, just continue with what you already know. Use the words you are comfortable with and build from there.
Yes, and that creates a very natural rhythm. You start simple, then you add more detail, and before you realize it, you're speaking longer sentences without even thinking about it.
Let me give a real-life situation. Imagine someone asks you, "How was your day?" Many learners try to give a perfect answer, and that's where the pause begins.
Right. But instead, you can answer step by step. For example, it was good. I worked a lot, I had some deliveries, and now I feel a bit tired. It's not complicated, but it flows.
And notice something important there. You didn't stop. You didn't go back to fix anything. You just kept going. And that's exactly what fluent speakers do.
That's true. Fluency is not about never making mistakes. It's about not stopping because of them.
Now let's talk about speed for a moment. Because many learners think speaking fast means speaking fluently.
That's a common misunderstanding. Speaking fast without control actually creates more mistakes and more pauses.
Exactly. What you want is steady speed, not fast speed. A calm, controlled rhythm that allows you to think and speak at the same time.
So instead of rushing, focus on staying consistent. Speak at a pace where you feel comfortable, where your thoughts and your words are connected.
And when that connection becomes stronger, your pauses naturally disappear, not because you force them away, but because your brain is working more smoothly.
Another thing I've noticed is that learners often judge themselves too quickly. They say, I paused, so I'm bad at speaking. But that's not true.
Yes, that kind of thinking creates pressure, and pressure slows you down even more. You need to give yourself time to improve.
Think of it like training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Speaking works the same way.
Exactly. Every conversation, every sentence, every small effort builds your fluency. I would say start very simple. Speak out loud for a few minutes every day. Describe your thoughts, your plans, your environment. Don't wait for a perfect situation. Create your own practice. And when you finally speak with someone, you feel more prepared. Not because your English is perfect, but because your brain is used to thinking in English.
And that's the key. Your brain needs training, not just information.
Yes, input is important, but output is what creates fluency.
So let's summarize this in a simple way. Don't stop when you speak, don't chase perfection, and don't be afraid of small mistakes.
And most importantly, keep your flow. Even if it's simple, even if it's not perfect, keep going.
Because at the end of the day, fluency is not about knowing everything. It's about using what you know smoothly and confidently.
And once you understand that, speaking without pausing becomes much easier and much more natural.
You know, Lauren, I think there's another hidden problem here that people don't always notice. When someone pauses too much, it's not only about language, it's also about mindset. They are constantly judging themselves while speaking, and that creates a kind of internal pressure. It's like they are speaking and at the same time listening to themselves, correcting themselves, and doubting themselves. That process slows everything down.
That's so true, and I see this all the time. People are not just speaking, they are analyzing every word in real time, and that's simply too much for the brain to handle. Imagine trying to drive a car while checking every movement you make, every second. It would feel unnatural and stressful. Speaking works the same way. It needs a level of trust and flow.
Exactly, and I think that word trust is very important. You need to trust your basic English, even if it's not perfect, because if you don't trust it, you will always hesitate, and hesitation creates those long, uncomfortable pauses.
Yes, and building that trust takes practice, but also a change in attitude. Instead of asking, "Is this correct?" you should start asking, "Is this clear?" That small change can make your speech much more natural.
Let's go deeper into that idea. When your goal is clarity, you automatically choose simpler words, simpler structures, and that reduces the pressure on your brain. But when your goal is perfection, you start searching for advanced vocabulary, complex grammar, and that search creates delay.
Exactly, and that delay is what people feel as a pause. It's not silence, it's your brain trying to find something better instead of using what is already available.
Let me give another example. Imagine you want to say something about your weekend. A learner might try to say, "Last weekend, I participated in a social gathering with my friends." But while thinking about that sentence, they pause.
Right, but a fluent approach would be much simpler, like, "Last weekend, I met my friends. We talked. We had fun." It's natural, it's easy, and most importantly, it keeps the flow alive.
And that's the key idea again. Keep the flow alive. Because once you stop, it becomes harder to restart.
Yes, and restarting is where confidence drops. You begin to feel unsure, and that feeling affects the rest of the conversation.
So maybe the real skill we are talking about is not just speaking, it's continuing. The ability to continue even with simple words, even with small mistakes, even with limited vocabulary.
I love that. Continuing is the real skill, because communication is a continuous process, not a perfect one.
Let's talk about another situation. You're in a conversation and the other person is waiting for your answer. That pressure can make you freeze.
Yes, that moment feels heavy, because you think you need to respond quickly and correctly at the same time.
So what can you do in that moment? You don't need a perfect answer, you just need a starting point. You can begin with something simple like, "That's a good question," or "Let me think," and then continue step by step.
Exactly, that gives you a little time, but more importantly, it keeps the conversation moving. You are still engaged, you are still present, and that reduces the pressure.
And once you start speaking, even with a simple phrase, your brain begins to activate. Words come more easily when you are already speaking compared to when you are silent.
Yes, silence creates pressure, but movement creates momentum. That's why starting is so important.
Another thing I've noticed is that people often wait too long before they speak. They wait for the perfect sentence, the perfect moment, the perfect structure.
And while they are waiting, they lose opportunities to practice. Speaking is a skill that improves with action, not preparation alone.
So maybe a better habit is to respond quickly with something simple, and then build your idea while you're speaking.
Yes, think of it like building a sentence in real time, instead of preparing the whole sentence in your head. That approach feels more natural and much faster.
Yes, think of it like building a sentence in real time, instead of preparing the whole sentence in your head. That approach feels more natural and much faster.
And the more you practice this way, the more confident you become. Because you're not waiting for perfection anymore, you're just speaking naturally and freely.
All right, before we finish, remember this. Fluency is not about speaking perfectly. It's about continuing without fear.
Exactly. So don't stop yourself, don't overthink, and don't be afraid of small mistakes. Just keep going.
If this video helped you, make sure to subscribe to Daily English and join us to improve your English every single day.
And tell us in the comments, do you pause when you speak English? Or are you starting to feel more confident?
We'd love to hear from you.
Keep practicing, stay consistent, and don't give up. And we'll see you in the next lesson.